Welcome, my curious companions of the cosmos. Today we're venturing on one of the most mysterious frontiers for human existence. Consciousness itself. Yeah, that's right, we're debunking the argument from consciousness, which you could probably tell by the name means, well, consciousness means there's a divine creator. If you've ever heard someone say, how can mere matter think? Consciousness must come from God, then you've experienced this argument before. So grab your philosophical thinking caps as we venture through this intriguing but ultimately unconvincing argument for God's existence. And as always, if you love videos from an angry atheist, don't forget to like and subscribe. Anyway, let's jump into the historical origins. The intuition behind this argument is ancient, but the argument itself is actually relatively new. Philosophers like René Descartes suggest that the mind is a different substance than the physical body, but the formal argument was developed by J.P. Moreland and Robert Adams in the 20th century. Contemporary religious apologist Richard Swinburne also challenged versions of this argument, suggesting that theism suggests a simpler and more elegant explanation. And then the argument gained renewed attention during the neuroscience advance. Now, with that all out of the way, let me introduce the argument. The argument from consciousness typically goes something like this. Consciousness exists in the universe. Physical processes alone can't account for consciousness. The best explanation for consciousness is that it was designed by or emerges from a cosmic consciousness. Therefore, God likely exists. In other words, it's saying, well, I think the fact that you're having a subjective experience right now is quite weird, so God actually created your consciousness. The concept has a special appeal because consciousness is really mysterious. The whole problem of how the brain creates subjective experiences remains one of science's biggest puzzles. Simple argument, right? Well, just in case you're still a bit confused, let's go over some common misconceptions. Misconception 1. Science has explained consciousness. Some opponents of this argument claim that science has figured it all out. This is not true. It still remains a mystery on how consciousness has emerged. Misconception 2. Matter can't be conscious. Proponents of this argument claim that matter can't possibly be conscious. But this begs the question. We know that matter can be conscious because, well, we're matter and we're conscious. The mystery is how it works, not whether it happens. Misconception 3. Consciousness is all or nothing. The argument treats consciousness as binary, but there's actually a spectrum of consciousness across the animal kingdom. Different creatures have different types of subjective experiences. Okay, now we've cleared that all up, let's jump into critique. Now let's examine why this argument, despite addressing a genuine mystery, doesn't actually provide compelling evidence for God. Problem 1. The God of gaps. The argument essentially says, we don't understand consciousness, so God did it. But history shows that this kind of argument leads to retreating explanations as science advances. Our ancestors didn't understand lightning, earthquakes or disease, so they attributed it to divine action. And as natural explanations were discovered, these gaps closed. Although consciousness admittedly has a stubborn gap, using God for these gaps has a poor track record. The argument assumes that physical processes alone can't account for consciousness, but it ignores the fact of emergence. This is where complex systems develop properties not predictable from their components. Liquidity is not found in individual H2O particles, but when they all meet, you've got a liquid. And ant colonies show intelligence that not one single ant possesses. If consciousness is so mysterious that it needs a cosmic mind to explain it, then what made the conscious mind's consciousness? The argument doesn't solve the hard problem, it just pushes it back and makes it infinitely worse. Now, instead of explaining human consciousness, we now need to explain a consciousness that made the human race and also exists without a brain. So where does that leave the argument from consciousness? While consciousness is one of the greatest mysteries we face, the argument from consciousness is not good evidence for God. The fact that we don't right now understand consciousness doesn't mean that we never will. Many phenomena that was once beyond human intelligence now gets taught in classrooms. As always, my companions, stay curious, stay critical, and never stop questioning. Goodbye.